It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a nigga on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.
And then we'll get into our super chats. Our other big story tonight is about this new war that we're starting. Once again, president of no new wars is at it again. And it's really a series of things. You've got a war against the cartel, which is unlimited, effectively, okay? This is something you need to understand. The cartels are transnational criminal organizations. They're in every American state. They control Mexico, large parts of Mexico. Their supply chains run through South and Central America. This is an unlimited war. This is a war without limit. So that's one of the wars. One of the wars is that we are rebranding the cartels as terrorist organizations. So these transnational criminal cartels that sell narcotics and illegal substances, these are now terrorists. And the reason we're calling them that is so that we can use extraordinary government power to fight them. Drone strikes, unapproved military actions and interventions. That's one of the things that is starting here. The U.S. military is preparing to enter Mexico, a country of 130 million people. That's a lot of people. It's a big country. We're preparing to enter Mexico to fight their super powerful drug cartels. We're preparing to fight them everywhere else, in Venezuela, in Colombia, elsewhere. Secondarily, we're also deploying a major force package off the coast of Venezuela, in addition to a number of other soft power tactics, to create a maximum pressure situation to bring an end to the Maduro regime in Venezuela. When does it end? And think about, just quickly, before we get into this, think about the current situation in the world. There's an unending war in Ukraine. It's been raging now for over 3 years, 3.5 years. It's a proxy war with Russia. And at any given time, this could blow up into a nuclear war. Ukraine is launching drone attacks inside Russia against their strategic aircraft. We're giving them long-range missile systems to bomb Moscow. We're running out of stockpiles of defensive systems and offensive systems. That's one thing going on. Another thing that's going on is the entire Middle East is a war zone. We're disarming Hezbollah in Lebanon. We're arming Israel in Gaza. We're bombing Iran. The Iraqis are kicking us out. We're bombing the Houthis in Yemen and fighting in the Red Sea. But we're also arming Taiwan. We're preparing for a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, so we're sending them all kinds of military equipment while China does huge military drills in the Pacific. We're fighting in the Horn of Africa. We're trying to prevent a war between Ethiopia and Egypt. We've bombed Somalia more times this year than any other year since 2019, the last time Trump was in office. And in the context of all this, we're sending 4,500 soldiers to Venezuela with destroyers and missile carriers, put a $50 million bounty on the head of Maduro, while we're preparing to invade Mexico. While we're invading Chicago and LA and Baltimore. This was the president of no new wars. This was the president of things would get calmer, more stable. There would be less conflict. Now it seems like did we misread that? Was there a typo? It's the president of unlimited war. Anyway, here's the news on this. That's just a primer. Trump is deploying 4,500 soldiers to Venezuela with destroyers, missile carriers, you name it, submarines, reconnaissance aircraft, drones, it's all there. And we're now declaring a new maximum pressure campaign against Venezuela. Like I said, the administration put a $50 million bounty on the head of Venezuela's president. And the purpose of this is so that there will be regime change. We're hoping that with a $50 million bounty on his head, that elements inside the military or in the regime will cash in on that bounty. There will be a power struggle. They'll betray the leader, kill him, and a more pro-American government will take power. We're deploying force in the region in the hopes that this will instigate a conflict. We are hoping that by maybe facilitating some kind of embargo, by attacking Venezuelan ships or personnel, then maybe they'll strike back and then we can attack Venezuela. That's what that is. And so pursuant to that strategy, this week, the administration released footage of them bombing some small vessel with 11 people on it. The administration claims it was a drug smuggling vessel operated by Tren de Agua, which they recently classified as a terrorist group. And so they said there's drugs on it. They didn't attempt to interdict the vessel. There was no effort to force them to surrender. They just killed everybody on board. They filmed it and they released the footage. And this is a story from the New York Times. It says, quote, "The Trump administration declared the start of a new and potentially violent campaign against Venezuelan cartels on Wednesday, defending a deadly U.S. military strike on a boat that officials said was carrying drugs. Even a specialist in the law of war questioned the legality of the attack. The administration said that 11 people were aboard the vessel. It was unclear whether they were given a chance to surrender. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said at a news conference in Mexico City that seizing drug shipments in recent years had not dissuaded cartels and traffickers. What will stop them, he said, is when we blow up and get rid of them. Pentagon officials were still working on Wednesday on what legal authority they would tell the public was used to back up the extraordinary strike in international waters. Congress has not authorized any armed conflict against Tren de Aragua, I've been mispronouncing it, Tren de Aragua, or Venezuela, and several legal experts said they were unaware of any precedent for claiming that a country could invoke self-defense as a basis to target drug trafficking suspects with lethal force. A former senior federal law enforcement official said the attack was a significant change in anti-narcotics operations. First, the official said, Tren de Aragua was not known for handling large shipments of cocaine or fentanyl. Instead, it was known to focus on smuggling what is known as pink cocaine, a psychedelic substance generally made by combining ketamine and MDMA. The former official also said it was unusual to have 11 people manning a vessel that could easily be crewed by 2 or 3, especially since traffickers are always trying to maximize the amount of cargo devoted to carrying drugs, not human beings. In the former official's opinion, it was more likely the vessel was carrying migrants on a human smuggling run, although it would be impossible to know for sure given that any evidence of smuggling was destroyed in the attack. Amid this belligerent rhetoric, the Pentagon has been amassing a small armada of warships in the southern Caribbean to include 3 guided missile destroyers. The Navy has also deployed 2 amphibious ready group, including the USS San Antonio and the USS Iwo Jima and the USS Fort Lauderdale, carrying 4,500 sailors, and the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit with 2,200 Marines, according to Defense Department officials. Several P-8 surveillance planes and at least 1 submarine have also been deployed to the region. So this is how I would treat this subject, because it is important to distinguish. I'm not anti-war at all. War is a necessary extension of statecraft. There's politics, diplomacy, statecraft, and there is war. And interventions of many different kinds and on different levels. It's necessary, especially for a global empire. So I'm not one of these people that says that we will ever achieve a world order without armed conflict of any stripe. So I'm not anti-war for moral or ethical reasons. I think war is frequently necessary. I'm not against interventions. I think that in many cases, again, as the global hegemon, it is necessary for us to intervene in certain instances. So I'm not ideologically against war. I'm not ideologically against intervention. And I would say that my real foreign policy, my real ideology when it comes to matters like this is it has to be in the furtherance of America's self-interest, always in every case. It should be just, it should be humane. I believe that we should exhaust diplomatic channels first, and as a last resort, in areas concerning vital strategic interests of the American nation, of the American people, I think that interventions up to and including war is sometimes necessary. So I want to make that clear. And in instances like this, we're reminded of why that's an important qualification. Why do we oppose the war in Iraq? Because it's not necessary. Is that the best use of American personnel? Is that the best use of American equipment, resources, money, effort, and energy? Is the best use of American equipment and all the rest of it fighting a counterinsurgency in Iraq? Trying to build up some democratic regime? I think absolutely not. I don't think that was the best use of force. I don't think that was the best use of all the available tools at our disposal to use in that situation. I think that could have been managed. I think there were other ways that we could have went about it. And when you look at a conflict like that, what is obvious is that it's so far away. It's an alien culture. It's a small country, not even a middle power. And it's in a completely different part of the world. And you look at who benefits the most, it's certainly not us. It is regional powers in that country. It's countries like Saudi Arabia or Israel or Iran. They all benefit on some level from that, far more directly, and I think in greater measure than we do. So people say, why is that our problem? And people say the same thing about Ukraine. Why is that our problem? Why are we fighting over there? And I think that the further away from America you get, the more compelling that argument is. And I think there's also an argument to be made in terms of proximate threat. Russia is certainly a greater threat than Iran. Mexico, however, is closer to the United States than Russia. And Mexico's hurting the United States a lot more than Russia is by sending us all these illegal immigrants and smuggling drugs and human beings than Russia ever can in their occupation of Ukraine or whatever else they might do. So this is how the conversation should progress. And when you look at this intervention in Venezuela, or elsewhere for that matter in the Western Hemisphere, what is clear is that this, you could argue, is our jurisdiction. How many people that came here in the past 4 years under Joe Biden came from Venezuela? It's a significant percentage. We had probably millions of Venezuelan refugees come to the United States in just the past 5 years, but many more over the past 10 or 15 or 20 years since the Bolivarian Revolution. And what's more, Venezuela is working with China and Russia and Iran. They're working with Cuba. They're working with Haiti. And they're right there on our doorstep. They're in the Western Hemisphere. They border the Gulf of Mexico. And they have an enormous amount of natural resources, gold, oil, among other things. And so if that's in our neighborhood, if their people are becoming our problem, if they're working with our enemies inside our hemisphere close to our borders, then this would be the best case to make for a regime change war or for some kind of intervention. It's hard to make a case for overthrowing Iran or Russia. It's hard to make a case for getting involved in Congo or Ethiopia or Somalia. It's easier to make a case for getting involved in Venezuela because we want that oil. We want that territory. We want to stop the tide, stem the tide of people flowing from that country into ours. We want to control our neighborhood for our security. And there's a much better case to be made about that than, let's say, Iran, for that matter, or Hezbollah, or Hamas even, dare I say it. With that being said, are we ready for a regime change war in Venezuela? Who voted for that? Did Congress authorize a war in Venezuela? Did the American people vote for a war in Venezuela? I could have swore that we voted for no new wars. What's the appetite for war in this country? We're fighting in Ukraine. We're fighting in the Middle East. We're barely out of Syria and Iraq. We just finished in Afghanistan. Now we're going to get involved in a major war in Venezuela. And how are we going about this exactly? Whose decision was that, and how are we going about it? Because what it looks like is they're trying to force us into a war. They're putting 4,500 sailors off the coast of Venezuela. 4,500 sailors are not going to topple the Venezuelan regime. So what's the goal? The goal of this, like was the policy in the first Trump administration, is to foment chaos. By putting a bounty on Maduro's head, by putting these ships off the coast, by attacking these Venezuelan vessels, the goal is to foment chaos inside the country, to create instability. And that could easily backfire. As a matter of fact, it already did. Why do you think we got millions of Venezuelan refugees in the past 4 years? Why do you think that was? It's because the first Trump administration had a maximum pressure campaign against the Maduro regime. As a result, hyperinflation happened and the people were starving. As a result, they started pouring into America as a direct consequence of our regime change policy. Does that sound familiar? That's exactly what happened in Syria. That's exactly what happened in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Somalia. Why do you think there's so many Somalians in Minnesota? Because we're involved over there. It's the same reason there were millions of people pouring into America. All those Venezuelan gangs, they came from there because we destroyed their country. Because we wouldn't let them sell their oil. Because we put maximum pressure on them in the hopes their society would collapse. Well, it didn't work. And so what do we have now? Well, we still have an unfriendly regime, and we have all their criminals here and all their refugees. Do you know that on Trump's last day in office in his first term, he gave temporary protected status to Venezuelan refugees? Look it up. After 4 years of John Bolton's maximum pressure campaign on Venezuela, which destroyed their society and forced millions of their people to move here, do you know that the precipitating action of that policy was that Trump effectively gave them amnesty on his last day in office? Google it. January 19th, 2021, Trump signed the order that gave TPS, extended TPS. That means temporary protected, means that if Venezuelans come here, they won't be deported. Starting to get it, starting to see the connection here. You know, it's a nice idea. Let's invade Venezuela. That's our neighborhood. Let's take it over. We're going to put the screws in them. It's a nice idea, right? But how does it work in reality? When it backfires and society explodes, but the government remains, they just send their people here. And what does the administration do? Gives them amnesty. And now we have millions of Venezuelans living here, and all their criminals are here, and Americans are dead. And there's all these incalculable effects of what they're doing because of that policy. Are you now ready for another war? And what's the big idea here? We're going to send a few boats and we're going to hope the society collapses. What if it doesn't? What if they put up a fight? What if there's some insurgency? What if, and riddle me this, after 4 or 5 years of unlimited open borders and immigration, what if there's terrorist attacks inside America? Has anyone thought this through? America's waging war on the cartels, which control Mexico, a country of 130 million people. America's waging war on Venezuela, which is a massive, rich country in its own right that has sent millions of its criminals and refugees into America. Has anybody thought this one through? Is this going to be a swift and easy, we're going to go in and we're going to just do things, eradicate the cartels, and then overthrow Venezuela just for fun? And we're doing this in the middle of the next war with Iran. We're doing this in the middle of the unending war in Ukraine, in the middle of trying to play this denial game with China in Taiwan. Now we're going to be fighting a counterinsurgency in America and Mexico and a regime change war in Venezuela to boot. What's the big idea here? That's the only part that I wonder. I'm not necessarily against regime change in Venezuela, but let's do it right. Let's do it the right way. Let's have a plan. Let's have limited objectives. Let's use overwhelming force and keep it limited and go in there with some semblance of a plan. Let's do it after we get out of Ukraine. Let's do it after we get out of the Middle East. Is this really what this country needs, is another war? Then that's not to mention we're trying to start a counterinsurgency in Mexico. Do you figure how that's going to go? These cartels are brutal. Do you see what they do? It has been tried. The Mexican government tried to put the screws in the cartel. They just escalate their tactics. Terrorism, kidnapping, brutal attacks on police and military. Do you think that won't spill over into the United States? Because you'd be wrong. And what is that going to look like? These are two things happening concurrently. A counterinsurgency in Mexico. Every cartel is a terrorist group. We're fighting a counterinsurgency in every Latin American country. And on top of it, combined with it, a regime change war in Venezuela. Has anyone actually thought this through? What's the logic behind any of this? So, and here's the thing, I could be persuaded something does need to be done about the cartels. Something does need to be done about the regime in Venezuela. But what this looks like to me is that the Trump administration is not governing based on what is in the best interest of America. It seems like they're doing things day to day, week to week, looking for easy layups. Why did he do the press conference with Vladimir Putin? To get good press coverage. Why did he do this attack on the vessel off the coast of Venezuela? To get an easy win. It seems like there's this deadly lack of a strategy inside the administration with the economy, with the foreign policy. And I'm not trying to be a concern troll, but like, look around. Liberation Day, what the fuck was that? You know, they had 5 years to put together this tariff schedule, and they put out this thing, this convoluted method of calculating them. They back off after a week. Well, is there a plan? What's the plan here? And then with the economy, they're just begging the Federal Reserve to lower rates, to bail them out. They've got this huge problem with the labor market. Inflation's ticking back up. Their strategy is to beg the Federal Reserve chair to resign or to lower rates to get more cheap liquidity. What's the plan? We're about to enter stagflation. That's the plan? What's the plan with Ukraine? We're going to beg Putin to stop, do a press conference. Wait a second, why is he not stopping? And now this. We're just going to start firing away at the cartels in Mexico and Venezuela, hoping it won't spill over, hoping it's going to be an easy victory. What's the goal here? I'm not liking where any of this is going. I'm sounding the alarm bells early. In the first term, maybe there was some kind of buffer because it was on easy mode. You know, we were still in the age of cheap credit. We didn't have the COVID pandemic. The Ukraine war hadn't started yet like we were in an earlier stage. But now we're in a real crisis. And it seems like we're heading over the cliff. I do not like the sound of any of this. Regime change in Venezuela, mark my words, it is not as simple as this administration thinks. Taking on the cartels in Mexico, same story. So I don't know what these guys are doing. It's not legal. There's no vote on any of this. There's no justification. They're running this foreign policy, it seems like, to please people on Twitter or something, to get the approval ratings up. It's not good. So I don't like it. And like I said, I'm open to it. If they had some sort of plan for Venezuela, if this was keeping in mind the strategy elsewhere, I could be convinced, because I think that it would be preferable for America and for America's best interest to have Venezuela under our control, have their oil resources, their other natural resources, to eject these other foreign powers that are there. I mean, if you're supporting Team America, that would be beneficial. I don't think this is the way to go about it. It seems like they're trying to instigate a conflict that we didn't vote for, half-cocked, while we've got all this other stuff going on. Doesn't seem like a great idea, but we'll have to see how that plays out. We're going to move on.
Let's actually have a conversation about these wars now with the cartel. Trumping them. That's instead of we. Trumping them, rebranded them as terrorists. So therefore they can, I guess, use the government power, that we demonstrated at our amazing military parade to now address the cartel. And this is something, hold up. My energy is not reflecting. Like, I'm looking back at my notes, and sometimes in my notes I'll put like it in caps, and I'm like, that's something that I'm excited about, or something that is an epiphany of sorts. And I wrote, I get it. Think about this. I'm gonna take y'all down a little, not a rabbit hole, but think about this. Why is it important, or why does it make sense to go to war with the cartel? And I guess when I say that, I have to say why it makes sense to label them as a terrorist organization. Think about the benefits. It's a war that, if it's fought, Americans can 100% justify it, right? For moral reasons, it can be justified. The cartel is bringing in all these drugs. Think about what we've always heard, Trump. Wow. Now it's like even more stuff is coming to me, because it's like, is this what all that border talk was about? Notice what he kept talking about when he talked about the border, that the fentanyl, all these drugs are coming and it's killing all of our American kids and adults from overdosing and bad. Think about this. Hold up. So from a moral standpoint, Americans, like the people, will justify going to war with the cartel. We'll justify that. But what it also does, that people may not be aware of, or just may not be thinking about it, who does this also protect? Whose business does this protect? Who's the cartel's biggest competitor? Follow the money, right? We always got to follow the money. Who is the cartel's biggest competitor? Is it Big Pharma? So let's say, like with the opioid crisis, the cartel, obviously that's a lot of these drugs, they're opioids, right? So it allows you to go to war, to justify war, and tap into our morals and our emotions, because everybody probably knows somebody that has either struggled with drugs, overdosed from drugs, right? And then it also protects our drug industry and Big Pharma. Yeah, this the same Big Pharma that gives money to all of these politicians. The same Big Pharma that gives money to all these mainstream media outlets. The same Big Pharma that has been controlling what is healthcare, controlling a lot of our, in a lot of ways, in their minds, I can see why this is the perfect war, right? War brings up the morale, boosts the morale of a country. There's a lot of money to be made in war across the board, and we can feed one of our most powerful industries. Now, when I think about the situation where we put 4,500 sailors at the coast, we're trying to create this chaos inside the country. Trump has put 50 million on the head of Nicolas Maduro. Clearly, Trump wants a regime change. What's the history there when it comes to Trump? What's the history? Why is Trump pushing for this regime change? Here's some history when it comes to Trump and Maduro, and perhaps some reasons why Venezuela is very attractive to America to get involved with, right? Push for regime change and then figure out a way where we can gain some power or profit both in the meantime. All right, so first, accusations against Nicolás Maduro. The US government under Trump labeled Maduro as a dictator, right? Saying that he's rigged elections, human rights abuses against protesters and dissidents, drug trafficking ties. Okay. So that's the first thing that was noted. Second was Trump's support in 2019 when Trump recognized Juan Guaido, hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly, as a legitimate interim president of Venezuela, arguing Maduro had stolen power. All right. The idea was to pressure Maduro to step down and allow free elections. Number three, which is funny as number three, is oil and economics. Oil and economics. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves. One more time for Dr. Umar. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves. Under Maduro, production collapsed due to mismanagement and U.S. sanctions. A friendlier Venezuelan government would potentially reopen oil trade with the U.S. and weaken Russia and China's influence. Now we're starting to get into it. Regional stability and U.S. national security. Millions of Venezuelans have fled due to economic collapse, creating a major refugee crisis across Latin America. Trump argued Maduro's regime fuels crime, cartels, and instability in the region. U.S. officials also claim groups like Hezbollah and Russia's Wagner Group gained a foothold in Venezuela, posing a strategic threat near U.S. borders. Okay. Anti-socialist foreign policy. Trump framed Venezuela as part of a larger fight against socialism in the Western Hemisphere, grouping it with Cuba and Nicaragua. For Trump's political base, regime change in Venezuela symbolized standing up to socialism and authoritarianism close to home. All right. So in short, he sees Maduro as a illegitimate dictator, a narco trafficker tied to cartels, a regional threat aligned with U.S. adversaries. And it's so funny how they always put oil like lower on the list than what I think a lot of us would think it is. And he's sitting on huge oil reserves that could shift global energy politics. That's what you put at the bottom. Sitting on huge oil reserves. The world's largest proven oil reserves, I believe that's what they said, right? That could shift global energy politics. Follow the money, man. Always follow the money. Now, Nick went over that in January 19, 2021, Trump signed the order for temporary protected status for Venezuelans. I got to look into that. Definitely got to look into that. But Nick said something that I stated in the beginning of the show that I don't agree with. Nick said that he's not opposed to war, but he also said that he's not necessarily opposed to regime change in Venezuela, but it just has to be done the right way. Now, when I said I disagree, I was talking about the war. Now, the regime change, I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but I think I've been pretty consistent in letting it known that I subscribe more to the George Washington approach, which is stop getting involved in foreign affairs. Stop getting involved in other people's stuff, whether it's U.S. aid and you're trying to leverage donations to control a group of people, or whether it's war and getting involved in certain people's conflicts and stuff. And keep in mind, we only hear one side of the story. And when I hear a lot of these stories with us getting involved in different situations, whether it's Saddam or whether it's Fidel Castro or whether it's Gaddafi in Libya, when I think about these situations, I go back in my mind and revisit those situations that I just named. And I'm like, damn, was it really what they told us it was? Was it really what they told us it was? Or was there something else? Was there pretext there, right? That was just supposed to get us on board with going to with entering the war, but those weren't the actual reasons. There was something else that they weren't addressing. There were some selfish needs there. But when I think about Venezuela in particular, it's like you're doing all these things to get involved in their country, to cause chaos. And then we sit back and wonder why people look at us the way that they do. Like how Bibi Netanyahu would say, like, yeah, they look at us as big Satan. And look at all the things that we do. Do we not think that this Venezuela situation has the potential to turn into a forever war? And let's say that it doesn't. Let's say that we go there, right? We go there and destroy them. We do whatever what is need to be done with the regime change. Probably going to be some lives lost, right? Okay. Who do you think that those Venezuelans are going to be resentful of? Even if it's a small group. Isn't this like the playbook to creating a terrorist group? Now, as I'm going through it in my mind, I'm saying like, yeah, why would they want to create a terrorist group? Well, duh. What do terrorist groups do? They commit acts of terror, right? So now when they do something, it always justifies a reason for us to respond. They may not even be going into it realistically thinking that this could be a short situation that doesn't escalate and turn into one of these forever wars. They may tell us that, and we may be naive enough to think it because we think that we're just the big bad America and how we look at everybody else as if they have second-rate armies and if they're not going to necessarily be committed to doing anything against the big bad bully of America. When it comes to bullies, there's always going to be a small segment of the population that may not be with that. That is not going to allow you to bully them. So I don't know whether this will turn into a forever war. I don't know, but I'm just not with us getting so involved in all of these foreign affairs and trying to clean up everybody else's house when our home is dirty. So that's where I'll leave it. That's my take. And I'll see you on the next one. It's the black guy in the corner, but they'd rather see a nigga on the corner. They say I'm stealing Nick's clips like I'm stealing Nick's chick, not knowing that I hit him first week for the lick. I said, Nick, I could post here while you post there. Let's run the ads up, then let's meet up over there.